Ukrainian forces strike Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery with Storm Shadow missiles. December 25, 2025. That is the headline we are waking up to this morning. We are talking a major, major escalation. Subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Aria for the latest deep dive by Defense Report. We do sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and, well, strategic developments.
Yeah.
And today, we're going to cover
The dramatic reality of strategic cost imposition.
Yeah.
I mean, we are confirming the first ever use of Western cruise missiles on critical, deep Russian energy infrastructure. This is a decisive step. It signals a lot.
It really does. And we are diving into a whole stack of reports from, just the last few days of December 2025. They detail Ukraine's deepening long-range strike capability, but also
Massive, coordinated retaliatory attacks
right
on the Ukrainian energy grid. And it all sits on top of these volatile, critical, global debates on aid and security guarantees.
It's a really complex picture, and for you, our listeners, we're going to try and simplify the stakes.
Right. We're examining how this war is increasingly being fought hundreds of miles behind any front line.
Okay, so just hours ago, precision missiles carved deep into Russian territory. They hit a key refinery that, it directly fuels Moscow's war machine. We'll unpack what targeting such a massive oil facility really means for them.
But this attack, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It came right after Russia's most recent, absolutely devastating wave of strikes against the Ukrainian grid. This was the 9th large-scale assault just since the start of 2025.
And that's despite all the holiday ceasefire talk.
Exactly. It's a campaign that has continued relentlessly. We'll examine the shocking scale of that attack and, the rising civilian toll.
And crucially, we'll look at the political plumbing behind all of this. The success of these strikes, it hinges not just on the missiles, but on the massive European rearmament effort and these sometimes volatile debates in Washington about U.S. tech. Okay, let's unpack this.
So the information is clear. It's been confirmed by the Ukrainian General Staff. The Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery, deep inside Russia in Rostov Oblast, was struck. And it was struck by Ukrainian forces using Western-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles.
A Storm Shadow, wow.
Yeah. For anyone tracking the evolution of this conflict, this marks a profound shift. It's no longer just drones hitting facilities near the border. This is a high-value, high-precision missile being launched right into their economic heartland.
That distinction, missile versus drone, is so critical. And the target wasn't chosen at random. Novoshakhtinsk is huge.
It is.
We're talking about a refinery with a design capacity of up to 7.5 million tons of crude oil per year. That's, about 115,000 barrels a day?
That's right. And even after previous drone damage slowed things down in 2024, the strategic intent here is just crystal clear. Ukraine is going after the foundation of the Russian financial system.
Absolutely. The economic function is vital.
Yeah.
This place produces diesel, Euro 5 gasoline, which they use for everything.
Military logistics, exports, you name it, plus heavier fuel oil and marine fuels. But what's often overlooked is the logistics. This refinery is tied directly into the main Transneft pipeline system.
And it has rail access, a terminal on the Don River.
Exactly. So by striking this one choke point, Kyiv is disrupting both their domestic military supply and a major export revenue stream all at the same time.
And this wasn't some isolated one-off hit. This was a coordinated, high-tempo operation. Sources from the SBU's Alpha unit confirmed simultaneous long-range drone strikes on the same night. We're talking December 24, 25. We saw targets like the Temryk seaport on the Black Sea and a major gas processing plant way out in Orenburg Oblast.
That coordination is the signature of Ukraine's evolving strategy. We have to remember, this refinery hit comes right after other key strikes. Just a few days ago, the Temineftegaz oil terminal was hit.
Right, that caused damage to shipping berths and a pipeline.
Yeah. And crucially, the focus isn't solely on fuel.
You're talking about the strike on the Stavrolen petrochemical plant.
Yeah.
Exactly. On December 23rd, the Stavrolen plant was hit. And why does that matter? Well, it's one of Russia's biggest producers of polyethylene and polypropylene.
So the key polymers used to make the airframes for the drones they're using, the Shaheds and the electronic warfare components.
You got it.
So the deep dive takeaway here is that Ukraine's strategy has really matured. It's a multi-layered campaign now. It targets the cash that funds the war through oil and the components used by the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
It's a high-stakes game of imposing costs, no matter the distance.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Ukraine is basically communicating a new capability. Distance no longer guarantees security for Russia's strategic assets. That's asymmetric warfare 101 when you're dealing with a much larger adversary.
Okay, let's get into the machinery that makes this possible. The Storm Shadow Cruise Missile, or SCAL-PG. I think our listeners really need to understand this system because it fundamentally changes what Kiev can do. It's a premier Franco-British system. It's designed to be low observable, highly accurate, perfect for deep strike missions. It has an operational range of 550 kilometers, well beyond the front lines, and it carries that specialized 450-kilogram broach penetration warhead.
And what makes a broach warhead so effective? I mean, why not just use a standard explosive charge?
That's a great question. The broach warhead is essentially a two-stage system. It uses a small initial charge to basically punch a hole through hardened defenses like a reinforced concrete roof on a refinery.
Okay.
And then the main larger charge detonates inside the structure. This is how they so successfully took out high-value naval targets like the Rostov-na-Donu submarine and the landing ships Novoshakhtinsk and Minsk. It guarantees destruction, not just, superficial damage.
The Western commitment to this is just staggering. France, the UK, Italy, they all donated the missiles. And we saw back in July 2025 that the manufacturer, MBDA, actually resumed production after a 15-year break just to keep the supply chain going.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the technical details meet the geopolitical debates we mentioned. So technically, the Storm Shadow missile relies on something called terrain contour matching, or TERCOM, alongside its GPS and INS navigation.
Okay, so why bother with highly classified mapping data TERCOM when you have GPS? What's the advantage there?
Jamming resilience. In modern warfare, GPS signals are, routinely and heavily jammed by Russian forces. The Storm Shadow needs to fly extremely low to avoid radar. TERCOM uses classified pre-programmed maps of the terrain to confirm where it is based on the landscape below, completely independent of any satellite signal.
So it ensures peak performance and accuracy, even if GPS is knocked out.
Exactly.
And that ties directly back to Washington, because those data packages fall under U.S. international traffic in Arms Regulations ITAR.
Precisely. ITAR is the system that lets the U.S. control where and how its classified military tech is used, even if the missile itself is French or British. This means U.S. approval and U.S. data are necessary for these missiles to operate at their most lethal. It just underscores that this whole strategic capability is a direct function of sustained political buy-in.
That's a powerful point. But for every punch Ukraine lands deep in Russia, the reverse is true for Ukraine's infrastructure. The hit on Novoshakhtinsk came right after Russia's enormous retaliation on December 22nd and 23rd. The sheer scale, it's almost unbelievable.
It was devastating. Russia launched 635 drones, including over 400 Shaheds, that's a number designed to just saturate air defenses, alongside 3 Kinzhal ballistic missiles and 35 Kh-101 and Iskander-K cruise missiles. I mean, just imagine trying to intercept almost 650 objects coming at you over 2 nights.
And the targets were ruthlessly consistent. Ukraine's energy facilities. This was the 9th major combined strike since the start of 2025. The acting energy minister reported the strikes basically knocked out power across 3 entire regions: Rivne, Ternopil, and Khmelnytskyi. We're talking nearly full power outages.
And DTEK, Ukraine's largest private energy company, reported that its thermal power plants have been hit over 210 times since 2022. It's a systematic campaign to degrade civilian infrastructure. And it's a chilling reminder of their strategy, especially when you remember they rejected even a basic Christmas ceasefire on these energy strikes.
Yet, amid this onslaught, we have to recognize the resilience of the Ukrainian Air Force.
Absolutely.
Ukrainian F-16s were credited with shooting down most of the Russian cruise missiles. This one detail just highlights how indispensable modern Western air assets are. They're the only thing preventing a catastrophic collapse of the grid.
They truly are. But we have to ground this in the human cost. UN data indicates that civilian casualties are 24% higher in 2025 than in 2024. These attacks killed a child in Zhytomyr Oblast. They damaged a civilian Lebanese-flagged vessel in Odessa. It really raises the question, is this achieving any military goals, or is it just maximizing civilian suffering?
And that difficult reality brings us back to the front lines, because while these long-range strikes get the headlines, the war on the ground is still this brutal, grinding conflict.
The intensity is just alarmingly high. On the Eastern Front, in the Pokrovsk direction, Russian forces are still grinding forward. Analysts assess that Pokrovsk and Minorod will likely be seized eventually. But this isn't a rout. Ukrainian forces are maintaining strong defensive lines, even managing recent localized advances.
Down south, it's just as fraught. Russian forces recently crossed the Haichur River near Ostapisky, advancing toward Uliapol.
And crossing that river is strategically important. It poses a real threat of isolating Ukrainian forces in that sector. It's constant, grinding attrition warfare.
And that attrition, it burns through hardware and, crucially, ammunition. Which brings us right to the geopolitical backbone of this entire war. Western aid. We can't forget the crisis created by the Trump administration's pause on U.S. military aid back in March 2025.
That was an existential moment. It was conditioned on what they called a good faith effort towards peace negotiations.
The panic was immediate. Ukrainian officials warned them that Patriot air defense missiles, the ones you need to stop Kinzhals and KH-101s, could run out in a matter of weeks. I mean, just think about that. It's a moment of near total vulnerability for major cities.
And Russia had already exploited previous shortages to get a reported 20-to-1 artillery advantage in 2024. Aid isn't a bonus, it's a life support system.
That vulnerability, though, created by U.S. hesitation, it seems to have spurred Europe to step up decisively.
That's the moment the strategic paradigm really shifted. The European Commission responded with the sweeping Rearm Europe plan in March 2025.
And the scale of that commitment it's a staggering number.
They proposed mobilizing close to 800 billion euros. That's almost 850 billion US dollars for defense investments. The core idea was to allow member states more flexibility on debt and deficits to make it happen. It was Europe recognizing that rearmament and supporting Ukraine are non-negotiable for their own long-term security no matter what.
So if we synthesize everything we've covered, from the tactical success of the Storm Shadow to the existential need for F-16s, what's the ultimate takeaway here?
Well, the core strategic dilemma remains. The striking power of Ukraine's Western weapons is now hitting deep inside Russia. It is successfully targeting the very economic and military foundation of the war. That's crucial cost imposition.
But the sheer scale of Russian retaliation against the grid, coupled with those grinding advances on the front line, it proves this effort has to be stable. It has to be consistent. The moment political will wavers, Russia presses its advantage ruthlessly.
And this brings us to the final thought. Russia is clearly signaling, by rejecting even a simple humanitarian ceasefire on energy strikes, that they will not accept any proposal that doesn't amount to Ukrainian capitulation. They are willing to endure these costs, even deep hits to their economy, without entering any real negotiations.
So what cost, applied strategically through systems like the Storm Shadow, will finally be high enough to change the Kremlin's calculus? To move the discussion from a dictated surrender to a just and negotiated peace? That is the question hanging over the winter of 2025.
And that's the strategic development you must continue to track.
You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Aurea, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.